It was a Tuesday afternoon in the fall of 1964, and the air inside Stax Records on Macklemore Avenue in Memphis, Tennessee smelled like cigarette smoke, wood paneling, and something harder to name. Hope, maybe, or revolution. The studio was not much to look at from the outside. A converted movie theater in a black neighborhood, with a faded marquee and cracked sidewalk. But inside those walls, something was happening that would change American music forever. Black and white musicians were playing together, creating a sound so raw and honest that it felt like the floor itself was breathing. They called it soul. On this particular afternoon, a 23-year-old man named Otis Redding was standing in front of a microphone, recording a song called Chained and Bound. He was drenched in sweat, even though the session had barely started. That was just how Otis sang. Like every note might be his last. Like the microphone was the only thing keeping him alive. His voice cracked and soared and begged, and the musicians behind him, Booker T. Jones on keyboards, Steve Cropper on guitar, could feel the hair on their arms standing up. This kid from Macon, Georgia, was doing something that nobody else could do. He was not just singing. He was testifying. And then the studio door opened. A man walked in wearing a perfectly tailored suit, his shoes polished to a mirror shine, his hair processed and immaculate. He moved with the kind of confidence that made everyone in the room straighten up without even realizing it. The man's name was Sam Cooke, and he was the biggest black artist in America. Not the biggest soul singer. The biggest. Period. He had crossed over into the white mainstream in ways that seemed impossible for a black man in 1964. He had hit records. He had television appearances. He had his own record label. Sam Cooke had done what everyone said could not be done. He had beaten the system. Or so everyone thought. Otis stopped singing mid-phrase when he saw Sam through the glass. His eyes went wide. Sam Cooke was his hero, the man who had shown that a gospel singer could become a pop star without losing his soul. The man who sang with such silky elegance that white audiences forgot to be racist for 3 minutes at a time. Otis had studied every Sam Cooke record he could get his hands on. He knew every inflection, every breath, every moment of controlled perfection. And now Sam Cooke was standing in the control room at Stax, watching him sing. Jim Stewart, the co-owner of Stax, shook Sam's hand and offered him a seat. Sam declined politely. He preferred to stand. He listened to Otis finish the take, his face unreadable. When the song ended, there was silence in the control room. Then Sam leaned toward the intercom and pressed the button. "That was beautiful, brother," Sam said, his voice smooth and warm. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" Otis nearly tripped over the microphone cable getting out of the vocal booth. He walked into the control room, trying to act calm, but his hands were shaking. Sam Cooke extended his hand. Otis shook it and felt the firmness of Sam's grip, the confidence of a man who had been famous for a decade and knew exactly what he was worth. "You have got a gift," Sam said quietly. "A real gift. But I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear me. Can we talk somewhere private?" They walked to a small dressing room at the back of the studio. Otis sat down on a folding chair. Sam closed the door and leaned against it. What happened in the next 20 minutes would haunt Otis Redding for the rest of his life. Because Sam Cooke, the man who looked like he had everything, was about to tell Otis that he had nothing. And worse, that Otis was walking into the same trap. "You sing like nobody I have ever heard," Sam began. "You have got pain in your voice that people can feel in their bones. White folks, black folks, it does not matter. When you open your mouth, people stop lying to themselves. That is a rare thing. That is a dangerous thing." Otis did not understand. Dangerous? Sam saw the confusion on his face and continued. "The music industry is not designed for people like us to win. It is designed for people like us to perform, to entertain, to make other people rich. You think I am successful? I have had hit records for 6 years. I have sold millions of records. And I do not own a single master recording of my own voice." The room went quiet. Outside, they could hear the muffled sound of the house band running through a groove. Sam's face was calm, but his eyes were intense. "I had to start my own label just to have a chance at keeping what I create. SCR Records. And you know what I learned? The system fights you every step of the way. Distribution, promotion, radio play. It is all controlled by men who do not look like us and do not care about us. They will love your voice, Otis. They will play your records. They will fill their pockets with money that your voice earned. But they will never let you own it." Otis sat there, trying to process what he was hearing. He had just signed with Stax. Jim Stewart and his sister Estelle Axton seemed like good people. They treated him with respect. They let him record what he wanted. Stax is different, Otis said quietly. Sam smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Stax is better than most. I will give you that. But Stax is also distributed by Atlantic Records. And Atlantic is owned by people who will smile in your face and rob you blind with a contract you did not read carefully enough. I am not telling you to quit. I am telling you to be smart. Get a lawyer. Read every contract. Understand that this business is a war and the weapons are not guns. They are percentages and clauses and publishing rights. Sam stood up and put his hand on Otis's shoulder. You are going to be huge. I can feel it. Bigger than me, maybe. But do not make my mistakes. Do not trust people just because they are nice to you. And whatever you do, do not let them convince you that you are just a singer. You are an artist. You are a businessman. You are a black man in America, which means you have to be twice as smart and work twice as hard to get half of what they get. Remember that. Otis looked up at Sam Cooke and saw something in his eyes that he would not understand until much later. It was not just wisdom. It was fear. Sam Cooke, the smoothest, most successful black artist in the world, was afraid. And that fear was about to prove justified in the worst possible way. 6 weeks later, on December 11th, 1964, Sam Cooke was shot and killed at a motel in Los Angeles. The official story was that he had attacked the motel manager, a woman named Bertha Franklin, and she shot him in self-defense. The police ruled it justifiable homicide. Case closed. But the story never made sense. Sam Cooke was 5 feet 10 inches and weighed 170 pounds. He was not a violent man. He was a calculated, intelligent businessman who had built an empire on charm and elegance. And yet, the official story claimed that he had broken into the motel manager's office wearing nothing but a sports coat and one shoe, screaming incoherently. The black community did not believe it. Otis Redding did not believe it. Nobody who knew Sam believed it. But in 1964, a black man's death at the hands of a white woman in Los Angeles was not investigated too carefully. The case was closed. Sam Cooke was buried, and the music industry moved on. But Otis could not move on. He kept hearing Sam's voice in his head. They will love your voice, but they will never let you own it. He kept thinking about the fear in Sam's eyes. And he kept wondering if Sam had been killed because he knew too much, asked for too much, demanded too much. Here is what you need to understand about Otis Redding. He was not a paranoid man. He was not a conspiracy theorist. But he was a black man in the American South in the 1960s, and he had watched his heroes die under suspicious circumstances more than once. He had watched the system chew people up and spit them out. And now Sam Cooke, the man who had warned him, the man who had tried to beat the system, was dead at 33 years old. So Otis made a decision. He would finish what Sam started. He would fight the same fight, but he would do it his way. In 1965, Otis Redding wrote a song called Respect. Most people think it is a love song. It is not. Listen to the lyrics carefully. All I am asking is for a little respect when you come home. Otis was not singing about a woman. He was singing about the music industry, about black artists who were being used and discarded, about the need to be treated with dignity, to be compensated fairly, to be given the respect that their talent earned. Aretha Franklin would later transform the song into a feminist anthem, and Otis celebrated that. But the original version was about something deeper. It was about ownership, about power, about the conversation Sam Cooke had started in that dressing room at Stax. By 1966, Otis was the biggest star at Stax Records. He had hits. He had a band. He had the kind of live show that left audiences gasping for air. But he also had something else. He had a growing awareness of how the business worked. He read his contracts now. He asked questions. He started talking about owning his publishing rights, about having creative control, about building something that could not be taken away. The Stax executives liked Otis, but they were starting to worry. Artists who asked too many questions were dangerous. Artists who wanted ownership were problems. And then came Monterey, June 1967, the Monterey Pop Festival in California, a massive rock festival with an almost entirely white audience. Otis was the only sole act on the entire bill, surrounded by rock bands and psychedelic groups. His manager was nervous. His band was nervous. This was not their crowd. These were hippies who listened to the Grateful Dead and Jefferson Airplane. What was a soul singer from Macon, Georgia going to do with 50,000 white kids? Otis was not nervous. He remembered what Sam had told him. The voice was universal. Pain was universal. Truth was universal. If he could reach these people, if he could make them feel what he felt, then maybe the walls could come down. Maybe he could finish what Sam had started. Maybe he could prove that a black artist did not need to be filtered through white musicians to reach white audiences. And so Otis Redding walked onto that stage at Monterey wearing a lime green suit, backed by Booker T and the MGs, and he destroyed every preconception that crowd had. He sang Shake. He sang Respect. He sang, I've been loving you too long. And he sang, Try a Little Tenderness, with such ferocity, such raw emotional power, that by the time he finished, 50,000 white hippies were on their feet screaming like they had just witnessed the second coming. The wall had cracked. For 20 minutes, it did not exist at all. Backstage after the performance, Otis sat in his dressing room with tears in his eyes. His road manager asked him what was wrong. I wish Sam could have seen this, Otis said quietly. He would have understood what this means. Because Monterey was not just a concert. It was proof. Proof that a black artist could cross over on his own terms. Proof that the system was wrong. Proof that Sam Cooke's dream was possible. But Otis was also exhausted. Years of screaming into microphones had formed polyps on his vocal cords. He had surgery in the fall of 1967. The doctors told him he needed to change the way he sang. He could not keep screaming. He needed to find a different approach. And during his recovery, lying in bed unable to speak, Otis started thinking about Sam again. About the elegance of Sam's voice. About the way Sam could break your heart with a whisper instead of a scream. That summer, Otis had spent a few days on a houseboat in Sausalito, California. He sat on the dock watching the ships come in and go out, listening to the water, thinking about his life. He started writing a song. A quiet song. A reflective song. A song that sounded like Sam Cooke might have sung it. Sittin' in the morning sun, I'll be sittin' when the evening comes, watching the ships roll in, then I watch them roll away again. It was unlike anything Otis had ever recorded. No screaming. No grunting. Just a man sitting still, watching the world, finding peace in the watching. On December 7th, 1967, Otis walked into Stax Studios and recorded the final version with Steve Cropper. He told Cropper he did not have a third verse yet. He whistled instead, a soft, haunting whistle that trailed off into silence. I will come back and finish it, Otis said. I have got this fade-out thing I want to do. 3 days later, Otis Redding was dead. His twin-engine Beechcraft airplane crashed into Lake Monona in Wisconsin, for miles from the airport. The weather was terrible. Fog, rain, ice on the wings. Otis was 26 years old. For members of his band, the Barkays, died with him. Only the trumpet player, Ben Colley, survived. When the news reached Memphis, Steve Cropper sat in the Stax control room and cried. He pulled out the master tape of Dock of the Bay and listened to that unfinished whistle. Otis was never coming back to finish it. The whistle would have to stay. Cropper added the sound of seagulls and crashing waves, the sounds Otis had described from that houseboat in Sausalito. And then he released the song. It went to #1 on the Billboard Hot 100, the first posthumous #1 single in American chart history. 4 million copies sold, 2 Grammy Awards. And that whistle, that haunting, unfinished whistle, became one of the most famous moments in recorded music. Because it was not just a placeholder. It was a goodbye that nobody recognized until it was too late. But here is the part that most people do not know. The part that makes this story more than just a tragedy. Sam Cooke died on December 11th, 1964. Otis Redding died on December 10th, 1967. 3 years and 1 day apart. Both men died violently and unexpectedly at the peak of their powers. Both men were fighting the same fight against an industry designed to exploit them. Both men were trying to own their art, control their destiny, and break through the walls that kept black artists contained. Some people called it coincidence. Others called it a curse. But the people who knew both men, the musicians who played with them, the families who loved them, they saw something else. They saw 2 men who had been warned that the system would not let them win. And they saw 2 men who refused to stop fighting anyway. Otis's widow, Zelma, said in an interview years later, Otis always talked about Sam. He said Sam knew something the rest of us did not. He said Sam saw the future and it scared him. What did Sam Cooke see? We will never know for sure. But we know what he told Otis in that dressing room at Stax in 1964. He told him that the music industry was a trap. He told him that success was not the same as ownership. He told him to be smart, be careful, and never trust the people who smiled while they robbed you. And Otis listened. He fought for his publishing rights. He bought his own airplane so he would not be dependent on anyone. He tried to build something that could not be taken away. But the airplane crashed, and the publishing rights were fought over in court for years. And the music that Otis created, the music that Sam created, enriched record executives and lawyers and radio stations while their family struggled. The system won, just like Sam said it would. But here is the thing about truth. It does not die when the person who speaks it dies. It echoes. Sam Cooke's warning to Otis Redding echoed through the 1970s as black artists like Marvin Gaye and Curtis Mayfield fought for ownership. It echoed through the 1980s as Prince wrote "Slave" on his face to protest his record contract. It echoed through the 1990s as hip-hop artists started their own labels. And it still echoes today, every time an artist talks about owning their masters, controlling their catalog, and refusing to be exploited. Sam Cooke and Otis Redding both died before they turned 35, but the fight they started is still happening. And every time a young artist reads their contract carefully, asks for a lawyer, demands respect, and refuses to be just a voice that makes other people rich, Sam and Otis win a little bit. Some voices are not meant to last forever. They are meant to burn so bright that even after they go out, you can still see by their light. Sam Cooke warned Otis Redding. Otis Redding tried to finish what Sam started. They both died trying. But their voices, their music, and their fight for dignity and ownership, that is still alive. That is still burning. And as long as we remember their names and understand what they were really fighting for, they will never truly be gone. If this story moved you, if you understand now that the battle for artistic freedom did not start with streaming services and Spotify, it started with men like Sam Cooke and Otis Redding who bled for the right to own their own voices, then subscribe and share this video. Tell someone who needs to know that great artists do not just create music. They fight wars, and sometimes they die in those wars. But the truth they leave behind, that lives forever.